Did you want to know about the download?
Yes.
Okay. There's a beautiful teacher named Trisha McCannon. She describes this, this as sort of power being trapped within the shadow, and that once you reconcile or bring healing to the shadow, you then access that power that was present therein, and it begins to be reconnected with yourself. So it's an empowering process and a purification process that happens.
I'm just gonna ask for one clarification, because this is completely speaking to me. I shadow is one of my favorite topics.
It's so fun.
Constant. I mean, fun and nightmarish and amazing and all of the things. But I just want to clarify for the listener who's not familiar with the concept of shadow. How do you see that?
So it's really the unhealed conditioning that we may have received in this life or past life. So they are often shadow aspects of ourself are generally thought of as the things that we don't necessarily like to lead with. We don't necessarily like to show those aspects of ourselves. So it might be jealousy or envy, or it could be very specific. It could be related to, like easily frustrated, anger. I mean, there's an endless array.
Anything that doesn't look like winning.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're not so we tend not to. So oftentimes the thing with shadow is we, as you well know, we don't always know it's there, right? So sometimes it's unconscious. It's not even something that we're aware we're engaging in or carrying rather. So, but it will come to light when we align with the spiritual path or with the desire to move towards higher consciousness, because it's, as the term implies, it's sort of a lower density vibration, and it's not negative. It's just it's also connected to wounding, right, or conditioning that we've received. So there's no there's something really wonderful about engaging with it, because as you know, I was saying, in terms of the power trapped in it is a really extraordinary experience to reconnect with that. But it also begins to make it easier once we reconcile it or heal it. It's sort of like when you have somebody come in and clean your house, like a deep clean, like a cleaning service, and they clean everything. It's so much easier to look around your house and just sort of say, like, now I can keep it clean, you know? It's like when you do this deep cleanse with the shadow work, it's just, you've become really aware of it. You've become conscious of what might not have been conscious. And so you become much more highly attuned to the juxtaposition of shadow and light. So when you start to lean towards an old tendency, like, I don't know, it could be just something as, something like envy, if you start to watch that come up in yourself, as you hear somebody say, oh, I just finished my first book, and you might be working on one or trying to work on one. Yeah. You could have this sort of envy coming up in you. And if you've really started to work on that, you see the juxtaposition and the felt experience of what it feels like when we have healed it is so, there's such a positive momentum associated with that. Like, it feels good to have healed it, that we tend to kind of just more easily stay in that flow versus, like being pulled back into the heavier density aspects of the envy or the shadow. But it will come up, and the thing is it can look not so fun, as you were highlighting. It's like not always the most enjoyable work to do. However, were you going to ask something?
I was really just thinking about what you were saying and the kind of excruciating aspect of it. Because I mean, shadow's my biggest teacher, and so I'm always going through it. Like, I think I'm just starting to think, oh yeah, no, I'm really raising my vibration and starting to feel pretty awesome. And then there it is again in my face. Suddenly there's inferiority, there's a feeling of weakness, there's a feeling of vulnerability, there's a feeling of overwhelm. I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, there's so many different shades of black, and I'm over time beginning to realize, this is the fucking masterclass. I mean,
totally.
This is it. And I'm just trying to think about how to really communicate like that, this idea, and how to communicate it to myself and to other people who may be listening, How do we embrace this confrontation with the worst parts of self? Can we at least associate this with bravery? I'm seeing
Absolutely.
this. I'm letting myself see it.
100%. That's exactly the most, in my opinion, the most skillful way to view it is to look at the courage that we possess to be able to kind of commit to this kind of path, right? Because it's not for the faint of heart, this spiritual path, because for these reasons, right? But at the same time, if you look at it, if you begin to shift your relationship with it as a master class, it simply becomes just that. So you begin to look at what's the medicine present in it, you know, what is it revealing to me? And as such, you become a little bit, it's like you disidentify from the experience and you're simply observing it.
Mm.
And you are able to stay more in balance as a result, and it doesn't pull you into the drama as easily. If you're simply observing it the way you're describing it, like a master class, you also can tap into the notion of like, well, if I'm in the midst of a master class, that must imply that I have a level of sophistication that merits this
Yay.
level of mastery, right?
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding,
So,
ding,
exactly, to
ding.
tap into that confidence. And
Yeah.
when you have that confidence, when you're in touch with the confidence, when you're in touch with the courage, again, it pulls you into center. And in that, from that place, you're not as bowled over as easily by the shadow. And it starts to become, dare I say, fun to engage. It's sort
Yes.
of like a hard workout. This is, you know, I'm an athlete.
Mm.
I think of like, you know, if I have this really hard workout that I'm about to do, I can look at it like, oh, this is going to be hard. But then on the other side, I'm like so psyched that I did it, right? And I
Right.
feel revved as a result of it. So it's very similar in that way.
Yeah, and I like how you're comparing it to physical exercise, because I think we're much more versed in how physical exercise works, right? You can get your butt kicked, but then on the other side of it, you have more energy, you have a better body, blah blah blah. And I think in this, there's less education. It's taken me a long time to get even to that thought that when I'm going through a kind of shadow teaching and I'm in the really shitty bit of it, there's just that little bit of my mind that's going, ooh, what's going to be on the other side of this? And it's more of a question because I actually don't know. And that's kind of what's really cool about it. But I've been through it enough times that I know that there's that moment of transmutation. If you stay with it, that the sparkles start kicking in and there's, yeah, right? The download of light
Totally.
eventually comes.
Absolutely. And for you to be able to, so clearly you can decode that. Like you, Jane, have a capacity to decode what's happening. And I think that's such a valuable thing for the earth plane at the
Yeah.
present moment.
Getting there,
Oh,
not there,
you're
getting
there.
there. Learning.
It's such a gift for the planet, for humanity right now, because as a collective, you know, there's so much shadow coming up within the collective. So there's a lot of people that would really, I think, benefit from what you're describing, from your capacity to track it in the individual and then help them understand what's happening from an empowered perspective, you know, which makes all the difference. And it
Yeah.
starts to, this is the piece about, you know, again, you know, we tend to think of like, oh, the work, to do the inner work. And it can feel like it's a bit of a drag. But if you start to relate to it from the perspective of how it's working for you, and you start to engage in the sort of magic aspect of it, because it really is, once you start to raise your vibration, and I mean this on every level. So of course there's the shadow piece that is, you know, spirit's going to take care of that. It's going to just come in, help clean that away or clear it away, bring it to light. But then there's also the conscious intention to align with higher vibrational activities and environments. So that's like, you know, like what kind of shows are you watching? You know, like, is there like some, you know, I don't know, violent video game going on in the background or something? I mean, like literally
Yeah.
everything, right? And also how we speak to ourselves, right? So there's this big cleaning up that happens within our own process with self, which is, you know, in all three, the sex, psychic, and psychedelics, it's, in my opinion, it's really important to have done our own work, right? Beforehand, right? Before kind of engaging, meaning Like if we're looking at sex from the perspective of sacred union, certainly you want to do your own work so that it creates an opportunity for that kind of powerful connection. So we're not projecting in the context of the relationship. But the same thing with, doing work, clairvoyant work, and the same thing as a therapist, it's really the same, because, in terms of projection, but just also when we're offering something in service of another, it's really in service of that person. So we want to make sure that our shit isn't coming out, right? And it's not unconsciously coming out. So this is where the inner work is so important, because there's so many gifted everything, therapists, coaches, psychics, mediums, their skill is extraordinary, but if they haven't done their own work, it can muddy the water. And it's really powerfully, like really is an important piece. So, but the same thing, even like if you're going into a psychedelic experience really in a lower vibrational place, like attracts like, right? Or the hermetic law of as above, so below. So it strikes me not at all being someone who is a specialist in any way, shape, or form with psychedelics, but it would strike me as important to be really aligned going into that, right? So I think that for all three, the piece of doing one's own work is so crucial, but
yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I feel like out of the three, in a way, each one carries this sort of spirit of transformation, the possibility of transformation, transmutation. And by the way, I like that we're talking about all three. Thanks for taking it all on. I thought we were just going to talk about psychics, but then this is really great. But you're kind of at this access point, and I don't want to move away from the download, because I know that we're still
no, it's all connected.
It's all connected. But you're kind of this access point where you can help people kind of, I was going to say pivot from the lower vibration to the higher vibration, but I don't know if that's quite accurate.
I think what they organically do, I think that folks drawn to the kind of work that I do are already aligned with like an openness. They've already said to spirit, like, I'm going in this direction.
Yeah.
So it is, they've already begun that. So they've already started in that way. And I can help show them in the same way that I was saying, you are a decoder. I can help them understand what's happening from, maybe you could consider it like a zoom out lens, but it's, yes, especially regarding self. And I think the self, the way in which we communicate with ourselves, perceive ourselves, engage with ourselves, I think is crucially important for all three. But if it's a way to raise our vibration. So if we're really, loving and kind outwardly, that's wonderful. But there becomes a lack of congruence. If we're loving and kind, but not kind to self, if we are, constantly beating ourselves up in the mirror or feeling, really reinforcing old belief systems that are not serving us, like, I don't know, like I'm not smart enough, or I'm not, whatever, I'm not enough, or whatever, that there's a way in which there becomes a lack of congruence between how we are with the outside world and how we are with self. And just that congruence alone creates a level of lower vibration, right? So when we're in congruence, it's higher vibration.
It's, absolutely. And I think I can really relate to this one on a personal note, because I've always been a pleaser and extremely self-critical. So I've done a lot of, sequins on the outside, self-recrimination on the inside. And now, balancing process, maybe not giving quite so much ostensibly, and also trying to be kinder, so on the inside. And I'm mentioning that because I imagine that it's quite common.
I'm in the same boat. I mean, I think most folks, maybe, I don't know if I should say that, but
maybe it's the healer archetype.
Yes,
maybe it's,
exactly. That's what I was going to say. Exactly. And so here we are.
Yeah. So here we are having this conversation.
Yes. Yeah. But I think that when we begin to catch ourselves relating to ourselves outside of kindness, we start to train ourselves to raise our vibration. So this is just a personal experience. Catch ourselves. Are we going to be self-critical? Catch ourselves, transform it in the moment, and all of these things start to raise the vibration when you are vibrating at a higher frequency. So literally, it could be like you're drawn to coffee or you're not drawn to coffee. That's a physical shift that can happen. You work with the shadow work. You become really aware that literally all the statements, and this may sound extreme, but it's really not. If it's really not, which is the idea of sort of what the words you say, like, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Right?
Yes.
Not just to the world, but to yourself.
Yes.
Right? So if you start to live in that kind of line, it keeps you in high vibration, and like attracts like. So circumstances start to come into your reality that support, that mirror that relationship, and it literally starts to feel like a flow, and the subtle realities become easier to tap into. So like everything starts to take on a meaning. Like I went for a run this morning, and I was only in the woods for a little bit, like a super short time, and I saw a beautiful owl who was really close to me. And I was only in there for a second. And to me, like, she had a message for me, like in my reality, like, other folks may think, oh, cool, I saw an owl, which is wonderful too. But to me, everything that enters my sacred circle is symbolic, and there's medicine present in it for me. And
what was the owl's message? Can I ask you?
It has to do for my experience at the moment, it has to do with a further balancing of the feminine principle, and sort of allowing that to be, I'm like more into the receiving, more engaging the receiving instead of because that's hard for me. And I think hearing sort of a similar thing there, it's very easy for me, even looking at it from the athlete profile, like, it's very easy to do, but for me is a bit more of a challenge. So I have always got to work on that, of the stillness. And oftentimes my body will show, like, I might bang my left hand or something on the wall. I make something communicating to me, come back into the feminine principle, come back into the receiving, the being, the stillness, the nurturing of self, right? And also the connection with the owl is, for me, the way I read it today was really just the continued presence of magic around, the continued presence. If you conceptualize the various meanings of the owl totem, it's, it does have to do with the divine feminine, but it's also the deep mysteries, like mystery schools, mysteries. So there's a lot, and it's huge interest of mine. So, and path of mine. So, but literally everything. I went to go somewhere, and I couldn't start my car for some reason. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it, but I knew I wasn't supposed to go, so it can be a drag. You can look at something and be like, damn it, and get angry. But I tend to reflect on it. I mean, I can still, being human, realize this is drag, but at the same time, totally accept that there is an absolute reason for this. Even if I can't see it, I know that Spirit's connecting with me to support me.
Life is the teacher. There's no other teacher.
Right.
Direct experience.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you begin to raise your vibration, you start to see that you are being supported and held at every turn. And that starts to feel joyful, as opposed to the first initial experience of the shadow work where it's like, oh, this is a drag. You start to feel really supported, and it starts to feel like you're engaged in a collaborative experience, which feels much more fun. And the collaboration for me is really, I mean, I'm an identical twin. So I came into the world literally in the same egg, it's one egg split, right? And so to me, collaboration is crucial. And I find a lot of joy in that. And, the spiritual path can feel quite like a lonely path
Yeah.
because it's a direct experience, but it can be done collaboratively, and to have a support system is so, makes it so joyful, which I think is really important, at
Support
least.
system, do you mean with other people who are also going
Yeah.
through similar things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
other dimensional realities as well as,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I was going into kind of thinking about it like a almost, like an internal family systems thing, which I'm
Yeah.
slightly obsessed with, although I haven't properly trained in it. So I shouldn't
Oh,
really be
it's
talking
such
about it. But
it's
it's
such
such a
amazing. It's such a cool paradigm. Yeah.
yeah. So I was thinking about what you were saying about how we talk to ourselves, and my own journey kind of waking up to this critical and impatient sort of part of me. And then I thought, okay, so who's that critical and impatient part talking to? So then, looking through that lens, finding the more like the small inferior child inside who's kind of having difficulty, having an experience of separation, basically going like, ow, it hurts, I don't want to do it, I don't want to play, I don't want to try, I don't want to expose myself, no, no, no. And then the critical part's going like, fucking get on with it, like, time is short, like do something. And
Totally.
so so sort of teasing apart these different parts of thinking, okay, so what's the part internally that is in pain or needs attention?
So,
And then yeah.
yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just thinking, and then how do you talk to that part? And I think what was helpful for me is, instead of trying to wrestle the critical voice and turn it into, a cheerleader, because that didn't, for me personally, that felt a bit fake.
Right.
I started trying to do it more on the level of tone. So if, like I do with my children, so if they're going like, instead of trying to give them a solution, I just be like, So I'm
Mhm.
meeting them on the level of tone, but I'm kind of opening it up a bit. So I'm going like, like you do with a newborn or something.
Yes, absolutely. And again, that's the resonance, right? So there's a sense of
Mm.
safety that you experience when you meet the
What did
authenticity.
you say? Safety?
Yeah, felt sense of
Yeah.
safety.
Mm, mm.
The authenticity piece is so crucial. I'm so glad you brought that up, because again, that's about congruence. That's about high vibration. If it just feels like, you're playing the spiritual path,
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same quality of transformative ability. It
Right,
has.
like you're just laying mantras over everything.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And but the really powerful thing is the intention. And this has always struck me, is intention, in my opinion, is the most powerful aspect of the work that we can do. So, because people can receive things however they're going to receive it, but if it was our intention, including to ourselves, right? Like if it's our intention to transform, an old belief system, but we meet it, and it just, like, again, we're trying first to be a cheerleader, and it just doesn't resonate. The intention will persevere, and you will find the key. If your intention is truly not from a defense mechanism of denial, like I tried it just didn't transform, like quasi tried, again, like
Mm, mhm.
perpetuation of the defense mechanism. If you genuinely are intentional about this transformation, it will be facilitated. Your higher self will communicate to you the key. How do you meet
Mm,
this part of yourself? And it'll come to you, whether it's
mm,
tone or whatever it is, because it's going to be different for everybody, right? But if I really feel that the language, of the higher self and spirit is definitely connected to intention, so it
mm.
can be translated, like the, because there's many different paths before us, as there are different individuals, and but if it is the intention to heal deeply, like you're committed to transform, to raise your vibration, to move towards higher consciousness, the path will be shown to you, and you will, and it's not like, some external source will all of a sudden demonstrate it to you. I really believe, that our that our destiny, if you will, is written by our higher self as a kind of path to guide us back to her, you know? And so it's, if you will, it's sort of like she's got the answers already, you know? And she'll give it to you. She wants to. It's aligned for it to be received. So you asking and aligning your intention will facilitate that process.
Why is it hard for us to reach our higher selves?
Oh, the ego. And the wounding, right? Because the wounding is where we start to, as you were saying about that, you know, when the idea of safety, how important this is. So many of us that are drawn to this kind of path, towards the path of whatever you want to call it, the mystic, right? It's not our first go around. This is who we are, right? And so, you know, we've been here before. And as such, we possess this knowledge within us. We've already gone this path, you know, on many levels in past life, if you want to conceptualize it from that perspective. We're not drawn to it because it's some amazingly beautiful thing that we're in awe of. It is. But we're drawn to it because of the resonance that it possesses. It's something that exists within us already that's
right. It's home. It's home.
Exactly. It's home. So the wounding can be, you know, from past life or this life, associated with that journey, can make it feel hard, right? Because it can stir up felt sense of, or a feeling of a lack of safety, trauma, all sorts of stuff from past of our journey as a mystic, or whatever you want to give, you know, whatever way you want to describe it. So there's that. And then there's the ego, right? There's the human part of us that starts to say, am I really hearing my guides? Like, am I crazy? Right? As clinicians here, you know, we can like give voice to that part of, many people contend with that feeling of like, well, if I'm hearing voices, doesn't that make me, you know, doesn't that imply that I'm having a psychotic break? Like, you know, so it's about bringing a sense of safety to that, and a normalization of that, and an understanding of how those experiences leave us feel, the idea is that we feel empowered by those kinds of experiences, right? Not disempowered. We're not feeling
right. I guess that could be the litmus test is, do I feel empowered? Do I feel set free? I'd love to hear about I mean, was this always online? I've definitely noticed there seems to be a correlation between being an identical twin and having psychic power. I have actually, I think at least 3 out of the 6 psychics I've interviewed were twins.
No way.
Really? Yeah, really.
Oh.
Really.
It's wild to me, because I feel like, were they identical too? Do you know that?
I don't know that. I'd have to check.
It's so interesting to me, but yes, because definitely we do have the capacity to receive from one another. And I don't know if it's because there's a, you know, when the egg splits, that there's a sense of capacity to tune into that field that you were once so familiar with, that strengthens that muscle, perhaps. I'm not sure, but that's very interesting. I hadn't actually ever looked at that.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So, okay. So, but tell me how you understand your path, and I'm really curious about Green Tower as well. But yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about your story of how it kind of came online for you.
So it sort of was always, I mean, I had the wonderful opportunity to grow up with a mother who was very psychic. So
okay.
she was very, you know, from very early on, normalized the process. And so it never was something, you know, and yet I come from a very scientific family. So that was the other piece. So like father and brother are both neuroscientists, and my mom was a nurse, but so science, but also super psychic. And so it was not, and both, you know, my father being he was a developmental psychologist, but cognitive psychologist. And so, you know, he never, he was very supportive of it. So I didn't have the experience of it being shut down. It was always really reinforced. So I'm super grateful for that. In terms of so it's always been present. But I think, you know, my original desire to go into psychotherapy to begin with, I think was out of like, maybe this unconscious felt sense of will I be called crazy kind of thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so sort of really got grounded in that piece more for I think for my sense of like, okay, so you know, like you understand this is, you know, what's sort of a loss of touch with reality or whatever, and you know,
Mm.
like to tune into spirit. And so I think it was really me working through, well, an opportunity certainly to work through shadow work,
Yeah.
but a way for me to come to a place of feeling safe, essentially coming out of the closet, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and it helped. I mean, it did. Like,
Yeah.
for a while, I noticed I used to say, well, I am a psychotherapist, but like almost like I needed to defend the fact that I can speak to your guides, you know? So that went away. But you know, I mean, we all have, like, I think for me, it was definitely past life associated. It wasn't current life because I grew up in a situation where it was like very supported, but definitely I know there was a past life impact around persecution around this particular skill set, and sort of like, is it safe to do this again?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of history around this skill set, and I've been sitting with that, even, you know, the vibration of the word psychic, and there's a big shadow there, and it
Oh
feels
yeah,
very connected to the idea of witches and
totally.
witchcraft and feminine power and anything that isn't understood in sort of
Totally.
linear kind of patriarchal terms. So yeah, I think that anything that is articulates itself as being off grid is
Totally.
threatening to the grid, and it's just that
Totally.
simple in a way. And thank goodness, you know, in some ways the world is opening up to it's cracking open,
It is cracked
um
open.
one way or another. It's happening.
It is. It is. Definitely.
So did Green Tara come through in this message?
Oh yeah, I always connect with her. I love
Mm,
her.
yeah, she seems
I call
amazing.
her in. I work with her energy, and I think the her presence sort of started coming. I would
Actually,
say,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna backtrack for a second, because I just realized I only just know who Green Tara is. I'm excited about her, and I'll tell you another story about her another time, because I'm beginning to feel quite connected to her. So I'm excited
yes.
to have this conversation with you. But who is Green Tara?
So, so she's so green. I'll give the shortened version,
Yeah.
but there's a lot to explore because there's various expressions of Tara, white Tara. There's other expressions of Tara, but the idea, the sort of very shortened version, is that um, as a woman, she was developing her level of mastery, and some monks came, or lamas came, sort of towards her, recognizing her skill set and her gift, and said, you know, essentially, you can come back and achieve mastery as a male. And she was like, hell no, I will, from this day forward, always incarnate as a woman and prove that women can experience enlightenment, can achieve enlightenment. So to me, she's sort of like the feminist Buddha. I love
Mm,
her. But
Tibetan.
pardon me.
She's a Tibetan. She's a
Yes.
figure in Tibetan
Mhm.
Buddhism.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And she is a representation of the divine feminine. There's a lot to say about her, but in the sort of very simplified version, she is it is her intention to she's, first of all, super heart centered. Um, the sort of the one interpretation of the green is the color of the heart chakra, right? So there's the aspect of her of being deeply capable of transmuting, calling on her particular mantra is so powerful. Is It's, when utilized, it can immediately transmute what
Mm.
you're dealing with. So whatever it is, whether it's, I've used it in circumstance, I mean, I use it all the time, but it is powerful as a clearer, you immediately feel her presence. So it'd be really cool for you having a relationship now with her to sort of listen to the chant.
Can you do it, or is it too long for this?
It's short. It's Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. And you can repeat it with the mala beads 108 times. So Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. But immediately when reciting it, you can feel her come in. And it's like, I mean, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, whatever you're feeling, like if you say this mantra, her presence transforms it. And it literally is so powerful and so effective. But she really came to me, she started coming to me and not, I mean, totally by design, but totally correlated when my mom died when I was 19. And her presence came in like clockwork, in almost like the divine mother coming into mother as I let go of the physical mother, you know? And there was a deeply reparative experience that happened with that. And so I just also acknowledge that what was her intention about restoring balance on the earth plane and restoring the idea that the masculine and feminine need to be in balance. It's not one more than the other, right? And that her sort of acknowledgement of like, women can achieve enlightenment, but this is not it's really, her take is really a balanced one. And I really believe that's connected to my biggest hope for the planet, you know, is that we come into that place of balance. And so her energy on the earth plane, whoever connects with her or resonates with her, I feel helps anchor that level of balance here. And we so need that powerful medicine on earth right now, you know? So, so I just love hanging with her energetically, you know, for so many reasons.
Thank you. That's beautiful. So, so returning to this, this position of deciding to walk down a spiritual path or inviting a spiritual path into your life and being new with it. We've talked about shadow. We've talked about different ways to raise your vibration. Is there anything else in that download that we need to hear?
Which really is about the balance with, yes. So the piece is when you, like, certainly transforming what can feel hard about the cleansing process into something joyful is really crucial, because, you know, calling in joy requires a healing of resentment, because resentment is the biggest block to joy. So if you're wanting joy to be present and your process on the spiritual path to be present, always what sort of enters in is this sort of teaching around releasing resentment, or we can call it forgiveness or acceptance, however you want to define it. But that piece, I feel like, is a very important piece. It's always ultimately always about forgiving self, right? But this is a crucial piece in terms of the higher vibration, because I conceptualize resentment as like a log in the flow of a river, and it's like it's if you. I also relate to resentment as a power leak, like through the connective cord energetically, or when I look at it psychically, if I'm looking at somebody who's got resentment over a trauma or an individual or whatever, a situation, energetically, I see them connected to it through a cord, and they're leaking power out of it. So it's not in service of us. You know, and when we go into forgiveness, again, it's not about condoning the actions of the trauma or condoning the actions of the person that elicited the trauma or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's about restoring our power and healing ourselves, shoring up that leak, you know. So it's really a service that we do for ourselves, you know. But there is also something really liberating about being able to forgive. So certainly the notion of like when we forgive, we are more easily forgiven, right? Like attracts like. So what we put forth is what comes forward. And you know, we're human, right? And we're, you know, we can be aligned with the spiritual path and really set positive intention to stay really congruent and whatever. But, you know, being in the human form, we're in the human form, and we contend with the limitations therein. So we can get, pulled off center. We can get angry at something, or whatever, judgmental, something that doesn't align with how we really are. And how do we like forgive ourselves? But if we train in forgiveness, we are more able to do that. So that's an aspect of not only bringing in joy because it transmutes resentment, but it also allows for us to reside in this experience of adapting to what comes at us, and not like beating ourselves up and being caught in like, I acted so human there, I stop at something, or, I don't know, whatever, it's a really important, it's important. I noticed this is really important as a mom, being a mom, that how important it is, not just for our own experience, but to teach our children, how to forgive ourselves. Like if we embody that, they learn how to do so. And then they start to create a reality where so if they're forgiving, they're more easily forgiven, right? So it's like a way in which to create a beautiful grid around them, even of everything we're doing as a mother starts to be witnessed by them. And as you know, as a mom and as a clinician, it's the witnessing that we really learn something. The intellectual teaching, and it's great, but it's not nearly as powerful as what we witness. Because we could say, oh, dear daughter, don't diet. No, you don't need to diet. But if we're like obsessing, like they get the message, right?
Absolutely. I'm thinking about something that happened with me and my daughters recently. And I always preached, not being a perfectionist and like you're saying, forgiving yourself and all of that crap. And and when COVID hit and I was forced into a more confined relationship with my kids, and I didn't have the normal resources that I had, everything changed. And I realized I'd been keeping up a bit of a kind of more of a Mary Poppins illusion before that happened. And then suddenly I felt like I was pushed into a corner with myself, and I kind of cracked. And there was this one specific moment where it happened, where I cracked and I said to my girls, oh my God, I'm so fucking crap at this. I have no idea what I'm doing. And there was this moment where I thought, oh my God, I just existentially failed. Everything's fallen apart. The whole illusion is screwed. And there was kind of like this gap. And they said, Mom, you're not supposed to be perfect. It's okay. And it was a really big turning point, because I had to sort of feel my way out of the shit show, or through the shit show, because it's still continuing. But suddenly it was all just that much more genuine, and I felt like we were just more in it together. There was more humility, and thankfully they gave me that little prompt to start forgiving myself for being a human, and actually start practicing what I preach, which is that we should all be humans, but easier said than done. So yeah,
I love that. I love that story so much, because what it shows is that you have embodied that practice so much that they've witnessed it, that they could mirror it back to you and say, Mom, you're not supposed to be perfect, meaning you have nailed just what you've been trying to nail.
That they're just much more advanced than me, and I'm lucky. Which I think is also true.
From your teaching.
Okay, fine, I'll take it.
But it's beautiful, and it's an example of how we shift roles with our kids to teachers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we find that vibration somewhere on the map, and then we just keep kind of handing it back to each other. It's like you find those songs that lift you up, and you keep playing them, and you keep sharing them with your friends. And I feel like, I want to take this moment to really say how grateful I am for you. And we've had 2 readings in the past over, I don't know, maybe 2 years. And what I felt I've received, I mean, they both felt like blessings, to be honest. And I feel like you've been back kind of to tone. I feel like there's been this sort of tonal demonstration of what self-love looks and feels like. So I can't really remember your words, although I know there were beautiful images that came through. But what I remember is this beautiful sort of, feeling of being kind of enveloped in this tonal sense of love and acceptance. And that has become a place on the map. I mean, it's still like fairy godmother territory. It's not quite everyday territory, but it's there. It's there.
Awesome.
And I hope that that can be, available to all of us, this access to extreme sort of gentleness and forgiveness and kindness, and also delight. I mean, some of me wanted to say, when I hear your kind words and your beautiful visions, well, but it's not really that good and it can't be that good. But I don't think that's the point. I think it's not existentially, can it be that good
Right.
all the time? It's, can I find that vibration? Can I make my way back to that vibration? And can I grow it? Can I get my hands on it, and can I grow it? And I just wonder if you have any sort of further counsel on that.
Um, Absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing, as a clinician in terms of shifting a habit, right? It's very similar but with this, there's such a positive feedback loop because it feels good to be kind to the self. It feels good to be loving to the self. And there's begins to grow this very strong contrast when we're not, that feels like, let's say, like you like, I don't know, ice cream, but you're lactose intolerant, and you're like, I don't care about the pain of my stomach, I'm going to eat it, but then it feels so painful, your stomach hurts so much that you're like, well, I'm not going to do it anymore, and so you start to say, like, it doesn't feel good to me anymore to eat that thing that I want to eat, that my body doesn't resonate with, and that, I think, you start to feel like, oh, I have more, I don't know, let's just say, I'm not sure about lactose intolerance, but let's just say you have less energy when you eat
Yeah.
it. You start to reap the benefits of what it does when you avoid that particular thing that's not resonating with you, that's neither good or bad. It's just not resonating with you, right? So anymore. So to your point, it's like it may not, I mean, we're human, so it may not be the sustainable, always experience your current reality is always resonating in the magic. But when you slip out, just like mindfulness meditation, where you start to drift off and now you're writing your grocery list, but you're really supposed to be focusing on your breath, you just gently bring yourself back. But don't berate yourself for being, grocery list writing, but come back simply to the moment. And it's the same thing. It's like cultivating that same capacity to gently bring yourself back to the kindness towards self. But it's such a positive feedback loop that it starts to feel easier and easier. And the more that you do it, that neural groove in your brain gets deeper, and it's just easier to go there, like a new habit. When you create that new habit, it becomes hard. Like a smoker who hasn't smoked for 20 years, it's really hard to get that person to smoke again, because to them now it smells gross and all this stuff, right? And they have this neural pathway that they do something different now when they're stressed, or whatever the case may be. So it's a lot like that. It's the initial training, if you will, towards that orientation. Maybe you might consider that as a little bit of front loading the work. And then it just becomes much easier, because it's like that analogy earlier on about, like, if a big cleaning crew comes in and cleans your house, it's so much easier to keep it clean. If you've done that work within yourself to clear away the shadow is not active, not pulling you in anymore, saying, like, remember, you stink. Remember,
Yeah.
you're not good enough. If that's cleared out, the capacity to be self-loving is much more easily accessible. So the more we move through that, and also the idea that with all three of these things, sex, psychedelics, and psychics, it is so important that you, being the instrument through which you're interacting with these three things, if your instrument is vibrating at the highest frequency, if you, as the guide, to somebody, or as their lover, or on a journey, that if your instrument is vibrating at the highest frequency, then what comes off of that instrument is highest frequency. So if it's unconditional love of the self, those are the notes being played off of you, and that changes everything around you. a positive, so it becomes easier to hang in that space, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so right. And it was making me think about my own psychedelic journeys and how much they've changed. I mean, shadows still come up, and I guess I embrace them quicker because I know that they're there to teach me. But I didn't, if you had told me when I started taking psychedelics, whenever it was, I think it was probably sort of, the more serious ones about 7 years ago. Um, if you told me that I was going to have really beautiful, ecstatic, happy, light journeys, I wouldn't have believed you. I was just like, that's not how this medicine works. And it just basically rubs your face in the shit until you grow. And that was my experience. And, you know, the ones that I've had in the last couple of years have just been absolutely delightful, like these unexpected kind of, I don't know what, just like, cosmic playground kind of stuff, like really, really fun and delightful, and yeah, just unexpected, and doesn't feel so necessary now, because I feel like, okay, great, I've been shown that, and I don't need to like keep doing that, even though it's really nice. But
Totally, but that
now
was
I've got to do something about it. Now I've got to share this good shit,
that's right. But
yeah.
that's such a perfect mirror to have that feedback from the experiences where it felt like a cosmic playground, because
Mm,
it shows you the transformation very concretely,
yeah.
and that's where you tap into, like, we were talking about earlier, like, at least we can think of ourselves as being brave for engaging in shadow work. But this is sort of like looking at yourself as a badass, where you look at yourself having gone through that and gone through the transformation. Like, this is the time where you seize the opportunity to see what a badass you are, that you did that work, that you stayed committed, and that you have transformed. Because if we don't take those, it's sort of like, it's fine. And it's not an ego thing. It's not an ego attachment. It's seeing oneself clearly. When we see these accomplishments,
Yeah.
it's easier for us to see ourselves more clearly.
I think that you're right. My ex-husband used to say, you got to take a win sometimes.
Yes.
And I like that expression. And I think it applies to both ends of the spectrum. I think that, I have spent some time trying to sort of bargain with wins and losses. And I think that wins and losses are part of life. And if we can embrace both fully, that's pretty good medicine. But it's challenging on both ends of the spectrum.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. That's why I love the metaphor of sport, because it really concretely, even for folks who are not necessarily spiritually oriented, it presents that opportunity in the language that's very accessible to people, which is sport, right? So it teaches little ones, and, all throughout the life cycle, if you're engaged in sport. I really do think it's powerful to be in a place of acceptance of both,
Is that how, I mean, I never really did sports. So tell me about how it is in sports with winning and losing.
Well, sport has always, to me, been a medium for personal growth, because it's so ripe with opportunities for exploring the self. And my sports they tend to be in more individual. So I am a surfer, but I'm also a triathlete, and so it's not so team oriented. But so you're really out there on your own, and they just continuously give you opportunities to relate to yourself in a deeper way. I mean, just like, there's so many metaphors in surfing about that, about it, connection with the self, not just with regards to the nature around oneself, but, when you're held under in a wave, and sort of, what do you do? How do you relax? How do you trust? How do you connect with, your higher self in the midst of, like, I can't hold my breath much longer, or whatever, right? Or you're scared. You're scared because it's a huge set coming in, and how do you overcome that fear, before you take off? Like, so many different things, because you will go, if you engage in the fear, you will go off balance when you're surfing. In terms of winning, in a triathlon or something, in terms of where you place or whatnot, or people, winning or losing, it's really an opportunity to kind of reflect on where, what did you believe in yourself? Did you believe, and, you could have, like, all the folks lined up on the starting line that are equally trained and equally fit, but the one that believes in herself the most is the one that's going to win, so it's really about a practice in that, because you can be out there for hours and you start to wane your belief in yourself. You start to be like, I'm going to give up or whatever. And how do you stay focused? So I mean, there's just so many analogies to
Mm.
to it, but you're not being attached to the win, right? Like the other side is like not going into sort of an ego attachment to it, but just simply looking at it as like, I accomplished a goal that I wanted to accomplish, not like attached to how I'm perceived or something like that.
Right. What it means about me.
Right. Exactly. Right. That,
Right.
yeah.
Can you go into what anything means about you, or is it better just to suspend all thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. I think, you mean in terms of like, would you lean into it as a,
Well, I was just thinking in that example, you could say, okay, it's not that I won, but it's that I followed through on a goal,
yes, exactly.
right? It's so I'm going to
Honor myself for
allow
that.
myself a sort of merit system,
Yeah.
right? Where I sort of reward myself for trying something and
Yes.
following through on it, for
Yeah.
example. Or do you just think, fuck it, all of that stuff is
Well,
ego based?
no, not at all. Because I think like there's a sense of, the same thing in terms of like looking at, the shift in the psychedelics for you, and looking at like what a badass you are that you went through what you went through to arrive in the cosmic playground. It's the same thing. It's sort of like, I rocked this race and like, I'm proud of myself for doing that.
Mm.
But it's not an ego attachment like, um, therefore I'm better than anyone. More of like
Yeah.
my own personal
It's more just like, yay.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just in the same
Joy.
way, the cosmic playground to you,
Yeah.
you're not comparing, you're not being like, oh, she,
Right. It's more just like, yeah, delight.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, totally.
Yeah.
So it's a way, um, it also is, for me, sport has also been a way to like, literally, I do have such deep respect for the body as a temple. And even in terms of sex, psychics, and psychedelics, I think having the body as temple, really respecting the body as temple and engaging with it as such, is necessary for each of those things. Because in terms of sex, certainly in sacred union, your own relationship with your body is crucial, for a lot of reasons. For a felt sense of safety, the capacity to be vulnerable and surrender and let go. This really, if you are connected to your body and in the way that it can be a portal for you, that will enhance sex and sacred union. And certainly plant medicine is engaging with your physical nature as well as your psychic nature, certainly. But so and then clearly, like for me, physical connection helps me to stay clear. So there are I mean, like, it's not that it's good or bad or anything about certain substances or whatever that I don't, because they don't resonate with my body. But it's not that it's good or bad, right? There's no label on it. And for me, like, being able to train keeps me, like, I tend to be anxious because of being sensitive. Like, I can pick up a lot from the collective. And for me, if I train, that anxiety is transformed. So it gets, like, literally burns off the anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's all connected.
Yeah. 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 I need to get on some kind of exercise program myself. Burn off that
I'll tell you,
COVID anxiety.
anxiety. If I think for folks who are intuitive, it's like such a blessing just to connect, even just to ground, even if you're
Yeah.
just out walking, how it grounds the anxiety.
Yeah. Walking is an absolute must for me. I mean,
Right?
that's the essential
For so
medicine.
many reasons. It's like a cleansing.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's something rhythmically to
Yeah.
it as well. The sort of the bilateral stimulation. Such good stuff. I've been doing EMDR and learning about that, and
I love EMDR. EMDR is
great, isn't it?
so powerful. It's so
Yeah.
fast. I
Yeah,
love
it's
it
so
because,
fast.
right? It's
Mm.
it's a lot like the psychic work, which you're going into the quantum field, and there it's a shift in consciousness that can help create a transformation. And the same thing happens in EMDR. I love EMDR. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, it's amazing to see when the imagination kicks in, and it like the healing and the imagination come in together, because people come up with their own solutions about how to heal. I mean, it blows my mind. But I'm going to actually ask one last question on that. anything you have to say on the power of the imagination and healing? Because it seems like you're fielding possibilities for people and planting seeds in their imagination. Can you tell me anything about that?
I'm so psyched that you brought it to that, because that is so powerful. So there's a teacher out in Western Mass, and her name is Halea Priest, and she's amazing. She's lovely, just a beautiful soul. I used to work with her at hospice. And she teaches this concept really beautifully. So I'm going to share what she teaches, which is, the various clairs. There's clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, clairsentience. And she calls this clairpretend. When she's trying to help somebody develop the capacity to develop one's intuition, she says, let's work with clairpretend. Pretend you can hear your guides. Imagine they're speaking to you. And this turns off the analytical part of the mind that's like, no, you're making this up, oh, that's just bullshit, and so I love that particular analogy, but this goes back even to Jung, because he was working with, what did he call it? Something imaginary. He worked with this when he, I don't know if you've read a lot about Jung, but when Freud Freud was sort of kind of like saying, here, come work with me, take this over. And he had this sort of existential crisis, and he went into this depth, right? And then he started to have these experiences, which I think he called it active imagination technique. Mm-hmm. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what he called it.
Yeah, he was chatting with all the figures of his unconscious. Yes.
And that's such a beautiful way to give ourselves permission to develop that capacity. It's really, in my opinion, you're accessing the quantum field. You're accessing, you call it the akashic field, the quantum field, the matrix.
Is akashic field the same as the quantum field?
The akashic records are really sort of, I conceptualize it as like the templates. The way I understand, the way I connect with it is that it's sort of like, once we individuate from source, the records of all of our experience is stored energetically. That's the records, the Akashic records. But
sorry, say the beginning of that. When we connect with source.
When we individuate from source.
I see.
You conceptualize this as sort of an aspect of whatever you want to call it, God, goddess, the all that is, when we individuate, there's an energetic template of us, and that's the records of the Akashic records. So the quantum field, like, I love Greg Braden's work about this. Do you know Greg Braden?
I don't know.
Oh, he's fabulous. He's really just brilliant. But he calls it the matrix. But it's in this realm that you enter. I feel when I watch somebody go through EMDR, I see them in the quantum field. Mm-hmm. This is why it's so fast. It's quantum healing. It's so fast. So I think that there's so much benefit to that kind of approach. But I want to make sure to answer your question. So feel free to bring me back to that question.
Well, we were talking about the power of imagination, and then we went to the woman in the hospice who was Claire. She did Claire pretending.
So when you're in the quantum field, you can imagine that you're connecting with your guides, your totem animals. You can imagine you're connecting with your deceased family member or whatnot, and it allows you, like I said, to turn off the analytical mind and begin to develop the ability to do that with greater ease. And you start to see that reality is the same approach to using imagination. So people consider dreaming into, and I think I'm not super familiar with all aspects of the sort of psychedelic process, but the idea of dreaming into being,
yes.
And that's using the imagination, right? And bringing it in and making it, allowing it space to become real, right? To become manifest.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And funnily enough, I was also thinking about female sexuality in this. There's a beautiful educator called Emily Nagoski. I hope I can interview her. And she talks about the complexity, the sort of scientific complexity of female turn on, because it's not just an on-off switch. It's actually like a whole switchboard of switches. And it's not only turning on the ons, but it's turning off the off switches. So you've got to negate the things that actively turn you off, as well as fueling the things that actively turn you on. And I was thinking, maybe it's like that also in the sort of the healing process or accessing the quantum field.
Yeah.
It's not only are you activating the imagination, but you also need to turn off those brakes that are always in place, or typically in place in terms of the way we've been educated, in the analytical mind.
Totally. Totally. Oh, I hope you get to interview her, because that's
Yeah, she's wonderful. Actually, her book's called Come As You Are, and it's a
wow.
really
I
beautiful
love
book
it. I
because
love
it's,
the title.
yeah, a great title, and
Beautiful.
proper science, really grounded woman. So it's a really lovely education. um oh, so good. Thank you. so
Thank you so
so
much
much
for
good stuff.
connecting. I'm so grateful. I love what you're bringing forward, because it's so,
Wonderful.
so I feel like we're in this really transformative time, that if folks like you who can decode what's happening help us understand, then we can follow the trail map to higher consciousness, balance,
Mm.
which is what we need.
Well, we're on the same path, so I'm here to support you, and it's wonderful to feel your support, and
Bless you.
may we just continue and flourish
Yeah.
and bloom and have fun along the way.